Before we dive in, let me pose this to you. Have you ever stood graveside mourning the love of your life, only to realize in that shattering instant that you never truly knew them at all? That gut-wrenching collapse of your world, not from their passing, but from the hidden truths they buried deep. Folks, this isn't some scripted drama. It's my reality, and it all unraveled at my husband's funeral. If you've ever felt the sting of silent betrayal, the kind that creeps up after decades of what you thought was a solid marriage, stick around. I'm Elizabeth, and I'll take you through the heartache, the shock, and the unexpected path to healing that followed. You're tuning into Renvenge Zinnia, where buried truths come alive through the voices of those who lived them. For 27 years, I shared a quiet life with Robert. No fancy country clubs or high-rise penthouses, just cozy evenings at home, holidays for two, and the occasional road trip. We never had kids. I couldn't, and he always assured me I was enough. But he traveled half the year for his IT project management gigs, handling corporate contracts out of state. He shunned cell phones, called himself old school. I bought it all. Little did I know. The day of Robert's funeral loomed under a sky so thick with clouds, it felt like the weight of the world pressing down, a fitting backdrop for the storm brewing inside me. I'd risen early in our cozy Seattle bungalow, the one we'd snagged back in the 90s when folks like us, solid middle-class types, could still afford a slice of the American dream on a tree-lined street with a view of the Sound. For 27 years, that's what Robert and I had. A straightforward life, no glitz or glamour. We'd skip the swanky country clubs, opting instead for backyard barbecues on the 4th or quiet Thanksgiving spreads for two, with pumpkin pie from the local bakery and football on the TV. We never had kids. I couldn't, after years of tests and dashed hopes, and Robert always pulled me close, saying I was all he needed. Half the year, though, he was on the road for his IT project management work, juggling corporate contracts in another state. He'd shrug off cell phones, calling himself an old-timer who preferred face-to-face chats over gadgets. I never questioned it. Trust came easy after so many shared sunsets on Puget Sound drives. I pulled into the church parking lot far too soon, the old brick building downtown with its familiar steeple standing sentinel against the drizzle. I'd agonized over my outfit that morning, a simple black sheath dress, sensible heels, and the pearl necklace Robert gifted me for our silver anniversary. I wanted to honor him properly, as the devoted widow after nearly 3 decades together. But stepping through those heavy oak doors, the air heavy with lilies and wax from the candles, a chill ran down my spine. The pews were filling up quicker than expected, and most faces were complete strangers. I paused in the aisle, clutching my purse like a lifeline, scanning for the usual crowd, neighbors from our block parties, or his local office buddies who'd dropped by for Super Bowl Sundays. Instead, clusters of unfamiliar people whispered in low tones, their glances sliding over me not with pity, but something sharper, more guarded. Colleagues from his travels, I rationalized, those out-of-state folks he'd vaguely mentioned during late-night dinners. But as I edged toward the front row reserved for family, that unease gnawed deeper. Why did their eyes linger on me like I was intruding on sacred ground? I smoothed my dress and took a seat, forcing a nod to a distant cousin I recognized, but the murmurs grew, a low hum that set my nerves on edge. Then my gaze locked on her. She stood stiffly near the casket, clad in black like me, but her posture radiated fury rather than quiet mourning. A woman my age, mid-50s, with silver threads in her pulled-back hair and eyes swollen from tears that hadn't softened her glare. Flanking her were 2 adults, a man in his mid-30s, built solid like Robert in his prime, with the same broad shoulders I'd traced during lazy mornings, and a woman, a touch younger, early 30s, sharing his sharp chin and intense stare. They weren't just grieving. They fixed me with looks of pure venom, as if my presence poisoned the air. My pulse quickened. I gripped the pew in front of me, steadying myself. Who were they? Extended family Robert had downplayed? He'd always said his kin were sparse, parents long gone, no siblings to complicate holidays. But these people felt too connected, too raw in their sorrow. The older woman, Sophia, as I'd later learn, caught my eye for a heartbeat, her expression not bewildered but brimming with a pain that mirrored mine, yet laced with accusation. She knew me. How? I shifted in my seat, pretending to adjust my program, but my mind raced. Had Robert mentioned them in passing? A cousin's branch? No, their resemblance to him was uncanny. The man's jawline, the woman's determined set of the mouth. I leaned forward slightly, trying to eavesdrop on their hushed words, but the organs swelled, drowning them out as the service began. The pastor's words washed over me in a haze, eulogies about Robert's steadfast character and quiet dedication, phrases that now rang false amid the tension thickening the room. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue, memories flashing. Our simple wedding in a chapel not unlike this, or road trips up to Mount Rainier where we'd stop at diners for apple pie and black coffee, laughing about nothing. But as the casket was wheeled forward and folks rose to pay respects, the undercurrent erupted. I was making my way to the exit, legs unsteady, when a voice sliced through the crowd, sharp, male, loud enough to turn heads. Unbelievable! She has the gall to show up here. I halted, pivoting slowly. It was the man, the sun-like figure jabbing a finger at me, his face crimson with rage. His mother clutched his arm, murmuring urgently to quiet him, but the floodgates opened. You destroyed our family. You were just his side piece, and now you waltz in expecting sympathy? The sanctuary exploded in murmurs, gasps, scoffs, even a bitter chuckle from the back. Side piece? The term landed like a punch, my vision blurring. Me, the loyal wife who'd nursed him through flu seasons, planned anniversaries with homemade cards, and waited patiently during his endless business trips? Air escaped my lungs in a rush. I couldn't draw breath. The woman's eyes, Sophia's, met mine again, not with surprise, but a hollow agony that confirmed the nightmare. She knew all about me while I stood clueless. Exposed. Whispers rippled like wildfire. How dare she? Pretending to be the real widow. She must have known. My world spun. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to shout that I was his lawful wife, that our vows meant something. But words failed, choked by shock. My throat tightened, and I bolted for the doors, pushing past staring mourners into the Seattle rain, heart hammering louder than the distant traffic on I-5. Alone that night in our empty home, the truth crystallized. Those trips weren't work. They were for them, another wife, children he'd fathered in secret. And I? The unwitting other woman. The accusations at the funeral branded me complicit. But I'd been blind. Signs I'd ignored flooded back. Vague travel tales, the suitcase he packed solo, calls he'd step outside for, punishment for trusting too much, or just the cruel twist of a double life. As grief morphed into fury, one question haunted me. How had Robert hidden this for so long, and what else would unravel now that his secrets were out? Later that evening, after fleeing the church into Seattle's relentless drizzle, I drove home in a daze, the wipers thumping like an accusing pulse against the windshield. Our modest ranch house on the city's edge, snapped up in the late 80s when rates were sky high but middle-class dreams like ours were still within reach, felt utterly alien as I pulled into the driveway. The porch light flicked on automatically, a timer Robert had set years ago for those late returns from his trips, when he'd shuffle in with a tired grin and a bag of airport souvenirs. I killed the engine and sat there, rain drumming on the roof, my mind replaying the funeral in jagged flashes. The son's pointed finger, Sophia's empty stare, whispers spreading like wildfire through the pews. Finally, I forced myself inside, shoes tracking mud, coat dripping, forgotten on the hook. No lights, no energy. I collapsed onto the living room floor, knees to chest, the rough carpet grounding me in the numbness. No tears yet, just a void, like the shock had hollowed me out. Robert had another wife, kids, a shadow family in Portland, bankrolled by the same funds that kept our lights on. For 27 years, I'd been half a wife, blind to his double game. The house is quiet, once comforting, now screamed accusations, every shadow a reminder of my ignorance. Was I mourning a husband or a stranger? Memories surged in sharp, unbidden waves, each one now laced with poison. I dragged myself to the couch, bundling under my mother's old Afghan from Iowa, its wool a prickly anchor against the chill. Evenings flickered back. Robert slouched in his recliner, thumbing the TV guide for MASH repeats. Us nursing decaf, his black, mine creamy, from mismatched garage sale mugs, bantering over gas hikes or Seahawks bets. Holidays cut deepest, Thanksgiving solo with a Costco turkey tray, the Macy's parade droning to drown the quiet while he crunched deadlines far away. Christmases for two, swapping practical gifts like his socket set or my dish towels. No kids' glee, but he'd pull me close, murmur, "You're my whole family, Liz." Pure deception. While I slipped notes into his suitcase for lonely hotel nights, he was doubtless weaving bedtime tales for hidden kids, whispering goodnights to Sophia. The betrayal didn't just wound, it eviscerated, turning decades of love to dust. Flashes of overlooked clues, hushed outdoor calls, the suitcase he packed solo. Blindness by choice? In our empty nest home, had I gripped those routines? Sunday salmon hauls from Pike Place, hand-holding block strolls, like lifelines against the emptiness? Or simply faithful like my parents' 50-year Iowa farm vow, weathering storms on trust alone? My phone buzzed. A text from Bridge Club Gladys. Saw the funeral drama. Can't believe you'd hurt his real family. Don't call? Real family? It's slash deep. Emails poured in. Liar. Thief. From old church friends, strangers somehow finding me, homewrecker cashing in while he died. I scrolled social media, heart racing, blurry photos, captions like "Mistress in Black," comments raged, shameful, no questions, just judgment. I paced the kitchen, tea cooling, untouched, Robert's usual brew for tough days, staring at the linoleum where we'd danced to old records. Dawn crept in, a thin hope flickering, misunderstanding, but truth crushed it. Hands trembling, I unlocked his office cabinet, the boring files he'd dismissed, statements revealed, Portland flights every 6 months, wires, thousands monthly, to unknown accounts, family insurance, Oregon rent, tuition. He'd preach thrift, coupon clipping at Safeway, no premium cable, while funding secrets. I slumped in his chair, a fool at 60, no kids or siblings left, family long gone. His ghost lingered, aftershave on the jacket, slippers under the bed. Should have tossed them, but couldn't. Paranoia gripped like sound fog. I bolted doors twice, jumped at knocks. Amazon deliveries or neighbors' casseroles now suspect. Supermarket runs? Eyes followed down Folger's aisles. Whispers. That's her. The scandal. I'd flee. Head down, fugitive-like. Punishment for blind trust or victim of his flawless deceit. The old Elizabeth, trusting, smiling through pain, was buried with him. What remained questioned every creak, bracing for more unraveling. As days blurred, the will reading loomed, promising fresh storms in the wreckage. The days after the funeral blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and endless questions, but the will reading loomed like a storm cloud I couldn't ignore. I'd paced our Seattle living room for hours that morning, keys jingling in my hand, coat slung over the back of the old oak chair Robert had refinished himself back in the 90s, when we were still dreaming of retirement road trips in an RV. What was the point of going? Whatever Robert left behind couldn't erase the nightmare at the church, those accusing eyes, the whispers branding me the other woman. But deep down, a stubborn need for some shred of acknowledgement pulled me out the door. After 27 years of quiet devotion, didn't I deserve to know if he'd thought of me at the end? So I slipped into my sensible black dress, the one from JCPenney I'd worn to countless potlucks and bridge nights, and drove downtown, the radio tuned to the local AM station, playing old crooners like Frank Sinatra to steady my nerves. The lawyer's office was in one of those sturdy brick buildings that dotted Seattle's core, the kind built in the 50s with creaky elevators and hallways smelling of dust and fresh brewed coffee from a Mr. Coffee machine in the waiting area. I arrived last, heart thumping like it did back when Robert and I first dated, sneaking kisses in his old Chevy pickup after drive-in movies. The conference room was stuffy, filled with folding chairs and a long table, scarred from years of family squabbles. Sophia was already there, arms folded tight across her chest like she was bracing for a blow, her silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun that reminded me of the practical women I'd known from church suppers. Flanking her were her two kids, the son, mid-30s with Robert's broad shoulders, glaring daggers from under furrowed brows, and the daughter, a bit younger, fiddling with her necklace and avoiding my gaze as if I were a ghost she'd rather not see. They didn't acknowledge me as I slid into a seat in the back, clutching my purse like it was the only familiar thing in the room. A few other faces dotted the space, distant cousins maybe, or old business associates, but the tension hung thick, like the air before a Pacific Northwest thunderstorm. The lawyer, an older fellow in a tan suit that had seen better days, cleared his throat and got straight to business, no small talk or condolences. His voice was steady, reading from the document like he was reciting a grocery list from Safeway. William's estate is substantial, he began, listing it out methodically. Multiple properties came first, a house in Portland left to Sophia, which made sense. That was their base, the one I'd never known existed until now. Then small trusts for the kids, one for the daughter, perhaps to help with a down payment on a starter home or college loans for grandkids, and another for the son, maybe to support his own family in these tough economic times. I nodded inwardly. Fair enough. They were his blood, after all, the children he'd fathered in secret while telling me I was enough. Retirement funds followed, built from his IT project management gigs, those corporate contracts he'd chase half the year. Investment accounts he'd nurtured quietly, always preaching frugality over our Sunday breakfasts of eggs and toast from the corner diner. Clipping coupons from the paper, grumbling about wasteful spending on things like cable TV or fancy vacations we never took. Stock portfolios that had grown steadily thanks to his habit of squirreling away every extra dollar for rainy days, as he'd say with a wink, pouring us decaf from the percolator. We'd lived comfortably but simply. No luxury cars in the garage, just our reliable Ford Taurus. No trips to Hawaii, but cozy drives up to Mount Rainier for picnics with sandwiches from home. As he droned on, I braced myself, expecting a modest mention, maybe a token sum for the years I'd stood by him, cooking his favorite pot roast or nursing him through flu seasons with chicken soup from scratch. But then the hammer fell, swift and stunning. For everything else, the lawyer continued, his tone unchanged, Margaret Turner is named the sole beneficiary of the remaining estate, including but not limited to the marital home in Seattle, all retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and personal savings, effective immediately. The room froze. I stopped breathing, my mind reeling. Sole beneficiary. The house we'd shared with its creaky floors and the garden where we'd planted tomatoes every spring, the nest egg that tallied to millions far beyond our modest lifestyle. Sophia's son erupted first, his chair scraping tile like a gunshot, face flushing crimson as he jabbed a finger at me. She knew, she had to know, he roared, voice echoing off the paneled walls. You don't hand over everything unless she was in on the whole scheme. The lawyer lifted a hand for order, but it was useless. Chaos exploded like a 4th of July firecracker gone wrong. The daughter piled on, her words spitting venom. You think we'll let you just walk away with it all? He was our father. You were nothing but his side distraction. Distraction? The accusation landed like a punch to the gut, my cheeks burning, throat tightening as if stuffed with cotton. I opened my mouth to protest. I didn't ask for this. I never knew. But no sound came, just a whisper, lost in the uproar. Sophia's eyes met mine across the table, not blazing like her kids, but hollow, reflecting the same betrayal I'd felt at the funeral. We'd both been duped, yet I was the thief in their eyes. Shouts flew, manipulation, like coercion, whispers of me isolating him from his true family. The room pulsed with fury, chairs shifting, papers rustling, legs shaking. I stood, whispering. I didn't know, though it dissolved unheard. I fled the office out of that storm of Robert's making into the bustling downtown streets where folks hurried by with umbrellas and coffee cups from Starbucks, oblivious to my world crumbling. Now I wasn't just a widow. I was the woman who'd stolen it all, the villain in a story I never scripted. Tears came hot in the car, mixing with rain on the windows as Robert's final act, protecting me financially while igniting this fire, sank in. How could one man's secrets unleash such hell? And what backlash awaited now that his double life was fully exposed? After the will reading, I didn't dare open my front door for 2 full days, barricading myself inside like I was under siege. The outside world had turned hostile overnight, and I wasn't imagining it. The glances at the grocery store earlier that week had shifted from sympathetic to suspicious, neighbors averting their eyes as if I'd committed some unspeakable crime. The local paper, the kind we'd subscribed to for years to clip coupons and check the obits, ran a piece that hit like a gut punch. Secret wife inherits fortune. After businessman's death, it didn't name me outright, but in a town like Seattle, where folks still chatted over fences or at the corner diner, everyone knew. The timing, the details, the implication that I'd somehow schemed my way into Robert's legacy. Whispers rippled through the neighborhood like rain down the gutters. 2 women at the post office, heads together as I passed, murmuring just loud enough for snippets to sting. Can you believe it? She must have known all along. I'd hurry home, head down, feeling like the scarlet letter in a Hawthorne novel we'd read back in high school English class, the kind of small-town judgment that sticks like tar. Inside, the house offered no refuge. Every corner was a minefield of memories that now mocked me. I'd wander from room to room, touching things I'd once cherished. Robert's slippers by the back door, scuffed from years of shuffling to the garage for his ham radio tinkering, his toothbrush still in the bathroom holder, bristles worn from his twice-daily routine. I should have thrown them out, packed them in a hefty bag for the curb on trash day, but my hand froze each time. Instead, I'd sit in the kitchen, staring at folders of bank statements and property deeds now stamped with my name, the ink fresh like a cruel joke. Millions. That word didn't compute with our life. Robert had always been the penny pincher, clipping Sunday paper coupons for Safeway runs, grumbling about wasteful cable bills or fancy dinners out. We'd drive our reliable Ford Taurus, no luxury SUV for us, to Pike Place for fresh salmon on weekends, or splurge on a matinee at the old theater downtown. No designer anything, just comfortable thrift. But apparently, while preaching frugality over our decaf and toast breakfasts, he'd been amassing this empire, funneling funds to his other world. The money didn't feel like a windfall. It contaminated me. Every dollar a reminder of the stranger I'd married. How could I touch it without feeling dirty? I hired a lawyer the next morning, not to fight, but to verify it was real, that Robert hadn't fudged the papers in some final delirium. The attorney, a sharp fellow from a firm downtown with views of the Sound, confirmed it all. Changes made a year before his death, fully coherent, notarized tight as a drum. "It's yours," he said over the phone, his voice matter-of-fact like discussing a utility bill. But why? Why leave it all to me, knowing it'd tear his real family apart and paint me as the target? The pressure built like steam in a pressure cooker. Sophia's son emailed first, furious, unhinged, calling me a fraud who'd manipulated a dying man, threatening to go public, sue for theft, even hinting I'd stressed Robert into an early grave with my demands. I read it at the kitchen table, hands shaking over my cooling tea, the same spot where Robert used to bring me chamomile after a long day at the senior center volunteer shifts. His daughter was subtler but no less vicious, posting on social media, vague at first, then pointed, that woman who hid in the shadows preying on a fractured marriage. Her followers, strangers to me, piled on with private messages, "Give it back, you don't deserve a dime." Be ashamed. I wasn't tech savvy, barely used Facebook for sharing garden photos or recipes from church cookbooks, but the attacks found me anyway, inbox overflowing like junk mail after a holiday catalog season. People I'd never met, some claiming ties to Robert's true circle, labeled me a parasite. The worst. A sliver of me felt the shame, even though I'd done nothing wrong, benefiting from lies I hadn't spun. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on the back porch, watching wind rustle the evergreens we'd planted together for privacy from the neighbors. "I don't want this," I whispered to the dark. The house with its creaky floors where we'd danced to old records, the cars in the garage we'd washed on sunny Saturdays, the money that haunted like a bad investment. I wanted my old life back, the simple one of potlucks and AM radio drives, where Robert was just my steadfast husband, not this duplicitous ghost. The isolation deepened, paranoia creeping in like fog off the bay. I'd jump at knocks, neighbors avoiding eye contact on morning walks, or the mailman dropping bills that now felt like judgments. At the supermarket, pushing my cart down aisles of Folgers coffee and Campbell's soup, I'd feel eyes boring in, real or imagined. Is that her? A whisper behind me? Or so I thought. I'd abandon the cart, rush home like a criminal. Was this payback for trusting too long? For building a childless marriage on routines that blinded me? Or just the fallout of his flawless deception? The silence screamed louder each day, the house a prison of reminders. Finally, after a week of knotted stomachs and sleepless nights, desperation won. I couldn't face Sophia's rage through lawyers or posts anymore. I needed answers, face to face. I scouted a neutral spot, a small cafe midway between our towns, the kind with formica counters and bottomless coffee refills, where no one knew our names. My message to her was polite, careful, no fight, just talk, for both our sakes. To my surprise, she replied within the hour, "Tomorrow at 10, don't be late." As I set the phone down, a flicker of something, not hope, but resolve, stirred. Maybe understanding was the first step out of this nightmare. I barely slept that night, tossing under the quilt my mother had pieced from farm scraps back in Iowa, my mind racing with what-ifs like a bad dream you can't shake. What if Sophia lashed out? What if she didn't show? But morning came gray and misty, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that soaks right through your bones, and I dressed simply, a wool cardigan over slacks, the sort I'd wear to the senior center for bingo or a church luncheon. No makeup, no pretense. At our age, what's the point? I drove the interstate in our old Ford Taurus, the radio tuned low to an AM station playing classics like Perry Como to calm my nerves, pulling into the cafe lot just before 10. It was a cozy spot off the highway, vinyl booths worn from years of truckers and locals nursing bottomless cups of Folgers, the air thick with the sizzle of bacon on the griddle and the chatter of waitresses calling orders like over easy with wheat toast. Sophia was already there, no frills, just dark circles under her eyes, hands folded tight on the formica table, as if holding back a lifetime of hurt. I hesitated in the doorway, heart thumping like it did back when Robert and I first dated, sneaking out for drive-in movies in his Chevy. Then I slid into the booth across from her. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just fixed me with that tired gaze that made the air feel heavy. I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut straight to it. "Did you love him?" The question landed like a punch from an old sparring partner, direct, no warm-up. I'd braced for anger about how long I'd known or why I hadn't walked away, but not this raw probe into my soul. "Yes," I whispered, voice catching on the truth. "I did." She nodded once, jaw clenched, eyes misting before she blinked them clear, like she'd practiced holding back tears for decades. "He told me you were a girlfriend, one of many before we tied the knot. I asked once if you'd reconnected. He laughed it off, said not to fret." Her hands shook slightly as she lifted her coffee, black, no sugar, the way Robert took his after tinkering in the garage on weekends. He lied to us both for over 20 years, scheduling birthdays around those business trips of his, watching my kids peer out the window every June, knowing he wouldn't roll back till Christmas. I couldn't find words. Her story mirrored my own empty holidays. Thanksgivings with a frozen dinner from the supermarket while he was away, or Christmases stringing lights on our artificial tree alone, toasting eggnog from the carton to an empty room. "What stings worst," she continued, voice steady but edged with pain, "isn't the inheritance he dumped on you, or even that you were clueless about us. It's learning I wasn't the only one he tolerated. We were both kept, like spare parts in his toolbox. Kept." The word sank heavy between us, echoing the way I'd felt sidelined in our childless home, clinging to routines like Sunday drives to Pike Place for fresh salmon or block walks hand in hand to ward off the quiet. I nodded slowly, the weight pressing down. I pictured our golden years, sitting on the porch, old and creaky, watching seasons shift. Thought we had all the time in the world. She let out a short, bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Time?" He sliced every minute like a pie at a church potluck. Holidays were the hardest pills to swallow. Now my kids resent me for not pushing back, thinking I let it slide, that I wasn't worth more. I looked her square in the eye. "Sophia, I swear, I didn't know a thing. Not 1 minute." She tilted her head, not accusing, just probing gently like an old friend over coffee. "Would you have left if you did?" I hesitated, honest in the pause. "I don't know. I'd like to think yes, but 27 years. That's a lifetime of memories you'd have to bury." She nodded again, slower this time. Same boat. We sat in that loaded silence. Two women in our 60s nursing identical scars from the same blade, betrayed in separate houses but bound by the fallout. No rush to fill the quiet. At our age, you've learned words aren't always needed. Eventually, she dug into her purse, a practical leather number, the kind from a department store sale, and pulled out a worn envelope, edges frayed like it had been handled 100 times. "He stashed this in our safe. A copy of his original will before he flipped it." She slid it over. I unfolded it carefully, scanning the lines. She was the sole heir there, my name absent like I'd never existed. "I figure he knew the end was near," she said softly, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Had to pick a side. Maybe dumping it all on you was his way of atoning, his twisted notion of love making up for the years he shortchanged you." I stared at the paper, the exclusion stinging fresh. "I never wanted the money. Still don't know what to do with it. Feels tainted." She met my gaze, softer now. "Neither do I." We parted without fanfare. No hugs, no promises, but as I stepped into the drizzle, something shifted inside. Not absolution or peace, but a shared understanding, like finding a kindred spirit at a widow's support group. For the first time since Robert's death, I didn't feel quite so adrift in the storm he'd brewed. Maybe this was the tentative beginning of stitching together the tatters. That fragile spark of understanding from my meeting with Sophia lingered like a warm ember in the cold days that followed, but it couldn't shield me from the storm brewing outside. The backlash intensified almost immediately, starting with small acts of malice that chipped away at my resolve. I didn't touch the garage door for 3 full days after that first act of vandalism, letting those bold red letters, liar, smear across the white panel like a scarlet brand on my soul. Neighbors in our quiet Seattle suburb drove by slower than usual, craning their necks from their Buicks and Oldsmobiles, the kind of cars folks our age still drove for reliability over flash. One of them, Mrs. Thompson from down the street, the lady who'd brought casseroles after Robert's passing, offered to help paint over it with a can of leftover bear from her shed. I declined politely, waving her off from the window. Part of me felt like I deserved the mark, a punishment for not seeing the truth sooner. And another part wanted the world to witness how one man's lies could twist grief into rage, unraveling lives like a loose thread on an old sweater. But on the 4th morning, as the sun peeked through the evergreens we'd planted back in the 90s for privacy from the cul-de-sac, I woke with a fire in my belly. Enough was enough. I drove to the hardware store, the same one where Robert and I used to pick up mulch for the garden or WD-40 for his creaky toolbox, and bought a gallon of white exterior paint, the kind rated for Northwest weather. Rolling it on, stroke by stroke, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, covering the hate with fresh layers. For the first time in weeks, I looked in the bathroom mirror, the one with the medicine cabinet full of his old razors and aftershave, and didn't flinch away. That same day, I decided, if they wanted a villain, I'd be the one they couldn't pin down. I wouldn't lash out or apologize for sins I hadn't committed. I'd rebuild, one small act at a time. I ramped up the anonymous donations, transferring chunks of that tainted inheritance to causes close to my heart. Food pantries like the one at our local church, where I'd volunteered soup kitchen shifts, shelters for women starting over after tough breaks, senior homes reminiscent of the facility where my mother had spent her last years, playing bingo and sharing stories from the farm. I even funded therapy sessions for widows, quietly wiring funds through the lawyer's office so no one could trace it back. It wasn't about buying absolution. It was like lancing a boil, releasing the poison bit by bit. Giving away those dollars felt like shedding thorns from my skin, lightening the load of guilt that wasn't mine to carry. Of course, word leaked out somehow, maybe through court filings or a loose-lipped bank teller, and it didn't take long for the backlash to ignite. Sophia's daughter posted screenshots online, her captions dripping sarcasm. Trying to buy forgiveness with daddy's money? Guilt cash. Keep your filthy hands off our legacy. Comments poured in from strangers, folks I'd never met, but who judged me like they knew my whole story from a tabloid headline. Then came the lawsuit, landing like a brick through a window. The formal notice arrived in the mail, a thick envelope from a Portland law firm, the kind with embossed letterhead that screamed, "Official business." Sophia's kids were contesting the will, claiming emotional manipulation, coercion of a vulnerable man in his final days, lack of mental capacity when he'd made the changes. I read it at the kitchen table, the same spot where Robert and I used to share decaf and the Sunday paper, him circling ads for tools at Home Depot while I clipped recipes for pot roast. They accused me of pressuring him while he was dying, isolating him from them on purpose. None of it true, but facts didn't matter in the court of public opinion. Perception ruled, and theirs painted me as the scheming interloper who'd wormed her way into his affections. I handed the papers to my lawyer, the steady fellow who'd assured me the case was flimsy. Doctors' records showed Robert Sharp as attacked till the end, witnesses and notaries backing every signature. But assurances didn't ease the sleepless nights. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, drawing the curtains against the world like I was in hiding. The anxiety gnawed, a constant companion like the arthritis flaring in my knees on damp days. It peaked one morning when I found an envelope taped to my front door. No stamp, no return address, just my name scrawled in thick marker. Inside was a photo of me at the post office, snapped from afar, captioned, "How's the blood money, Liz?" in red ink that dripped like fresh paint. I dropped it, rushing to the sink to retch, dry heaves shaking my frame. It wasn't fear for my safety. It was dread of becoming the monster they claimed, the woman who'd profited from deceit. I called the lawyer again, voice trembling. "I want to settle." He protested. It wasn't necessary, the case weak as watered-down coffee. But I insisted. Enough fighting. I craved freedom from the noose tightening around my neck. That afternoon, I phoned Sophia for the second time, my old rotary dial clicking like a countdown. She didn't sound surprised, her voice weary over the line. "I've seen what they're doing, the photo, the posts. I didn't know." "I don't want to fight anymore," I said. "I'll divide the estate, not because I owe it, but to be free." Silence stretched, then, "Meet me tomorrow." We reconvened at the same cafe, the vinyl booths familiar now, the waitress refilling our mugs with a knowing nod. Sophia looked different, still tired but warmer, like a weight had lifted slightly. She apologized for her kids' antics, not just the lawsuit, but the hate campaign ripping through social media like a brush fire. "They're angry," she said, stirring her coffee. "Don't know where to put it." "Neither did I replied. We talked for over an hour, grief's raw edges, betrayal's sting, motherhood's joys and absences in my childless life. Eventually, we hammered out an agreement, a fund for her grandkids' futures, another chunk to a nonprofit in Robert's name for folks facing double lives or hidden pains. The rest? Mine to handle as I saw fit. We walked out together, not friends, but no longer foes. Back home that night, staring at the living room walls where Robert's photos still hung, the space felt less claustrophobic. No husband, no kids, no old pals left after the scandal's scorch, but a door cracked open, and I was ready to step through. The settlement with Sophia had cracked open a door I hadn't known was there, but stepping through meant leaving the wreckage behind for good. I didn't announce my move to anyone, not the lawyer who dotted every I in the paperwork like an old-time bookkeeper, not the neighbors who'd started giving me wide berth on morning walks, not even Sophia at first. At my age, with joints creaking like the floorboards in our old Seattle ranch house, I needed a fresh start, the kind where you load up the car with boxes and head to quieter pastures, much like folks did after the war, chasing peace in small towns. Too many stares judged me on half-truths, pity from the church ladies who'd brought tuna casseroles after the funeral, contempt from others whispering over backyard fences, no in-between. So I packed in silence, methodically, as sorting through an estate sale at the local VFW hall. I sold the house, the one with the kitchen where I'd baked apple pies from scratch for block parties, and the living room where Robert and I had swayed to Glenn Miller on the record player. Every creak echoed secrets now, drawers he'd kept locked, tidy as his hidden life. I donated the bulk of the furniture to Goodwill, the place I'd volunteered at during his trips, keeping just the basics, faded photo albums from our early days, my mother's china teacups from Iowa auctions, a stack of well-thumbed Reader's Digest books, and clothes that still fit after years of comfort foods like pot roast and mashed potatoes from the crock pot. The new cottage, 2 towns over, was modest perfection. A white picket fence evoking Norman Rockwell scenes, a maple tree promising shade for summer afternoons with iced tea from Lipton bags steeped in the sun. No baggage here, no scandal. Just another widow easing into a street where folks waved from rockers on wraparound porches. Sleep came easier, unbroken by nightmares, woken by birdsong and the distant hum of lawnmowers instead of heart-pounding doubts. Mornings turned ritual, tea on the porch, no blaring news, just the local AM station spinning Perry Como or Bing Crosby to ease into the day. A jogger's wave startled me at first, but her genuine smile, no prying, no judgment, felt like a blessing, like finding a lucky penny on a sidewalk as a kid. I stumbled upon the local museum downtown, a quaint spot with exhibits on pioneer days and old logging tools, and offered my time. Ruth, the director, A spry gal in her 60s with glasses like my old school marm handed me a box of artifacts without a single question about my past. "Think you can sort these?" she asked. I nearly wept. It was the first normal task in months. Saturdays in the exhibit room brought vitality, guiding wide-eyed school groups through displays, their questions sparking stories from my own history, like the farm tools reminding me of Iowa harvests. The movement, the chatter, it whispered that life still held pockets untouched by betrayal. Adopting Bella sealed the shift. At the local shelter, a no-kill haven run by volunteers much like our church bazaars, I spotted her. A golden mutt with one floppy ear, medium build full of gentle wag. I named her Bella after the beauty rising from my chaos, the month it shattered and the one I rebuilt. She trailed me everywhere, her tail thumps echoing through the cottage like applause, sleeping at my bed's foot as if guarding against lonely nights. Her non-judging gaze watched as I unpacked the last box, turning the place into a home. Sophia heard about the move through the grapevine, maybe the lawyer, and texted, "Settled in okay?" I replied yes, and one Saturday she arrived with bakery cookies. Not homemade, but from a Portland spot she swore by, chewy with walnuts like the ones from our old neighborhood sales. We sat on the porch, Bella lolling at our feet, chatting books from the library club or the rising cost of Medicare premiums, gardening tips for rainy climes. No Robert talk, just life. Her visits grew frequent, a quiet rhythm like the tides on Puget Sound. But shadows lingered. One crisp Saturday, back from the farmer's market with Bella toting a bag of apples in her mouth like a trophy, an envelope waited on the step. No stamp, no return. Inside, photocopies of filings, forum rants, topped with red scrawl, "You thought we were done." Sophia's son, obsessed as whispers hinted, convinced she'd sold out by befriending me. He dug up emails, pestered colleagues, aiming to reopen the case. My lawyer dismissed it as baseless, but the words, manipulation, fraud, yanked me back to early despair. Anxiety coiled tight. I stayed indoors a week. Bella's nudges my only pull to the yard. Local news sniffed it out, a quick blurb on the evening segment stirring the pot anew. Sophia called, "He's lost Liz, but I'll fix it." 2 days later, she showed, having filed a defense with the Attorney General. Robert's choice is his own, guilt-driven, not coerced. At the hearing, she sat beside me in the courthouse, lawyers sparring while reporters hovered like flies at a picnic. The judge banged the gavel in under half an hour, dismissed, no grounds. Outside, Sophia faced the mics. "She's no enemy, we're both victims. My son needs healing, not hate." I wept in the car, not relief, but gratitude for her fierce stand. Bonds deepened slowly. Sophia brought her grandkids one fall day, leaves swirling like confetti at a parade. Shy at first, they thawed with Bella's antics. Fetch in the yard, giggles filling the air like music from an old radio. They dubbed me Miss Liz, a title warming me like hot cider on a chilly eve. I didn't push, just shared cookies and stories from Iowa farms. Her daughter joined, stiff initially, but softening over lunches of roasted veggies and chicken from the oven. We talked school costs, weather woes, dogs, no past grudges. Christmas arrived with a gold-trimmed card. Eve dinner, bring Bella. The drive was snow-dusted, Bella's tail thumping excitement. Sophia hugged me at the door, red sweater bright, silver hair pinned. The living room glowed with pine candles, carols on the hi-fi. Grandkids dashed, daughter nodded warmly. Dinner, turkey, potatoes, pie, passed like family. The boy asking if I was Museum Miss Liz, grinning when his mom said I spun the best yarns. Later, over wine, Sophia confided, "Never thought we'd share this. No anger left, just grace." I whispered, "Never aimed to replace." Her granddaughter's card sealed it. Stick figures. To Tia Liz, Merry Christmas. Aunt. My heart bloomed, gentle healing in that imperfect room. I'd gained a place built on truth, not secrets. Spring unfolded softly, maple leaves budding promises, bird song heralding mornings. I walked Bella on trails, waving to neighbors, chatting exhibits at the museum, guiding with tales, dog treats in pocket. No past haunts here. I was Miss Liz, porch with wind chimes, shelter dog at side. Aches returned small, a photo, article, but manageable, pulsing quiet. One porch afternoon with Sophia, tea steaming, Bella grass rolling, grandkids' laughter echoing, she mused, "Think of him sometimes, not lies, just moments." I nodded. Me too. No full forgiveness, he hadn't earned it, but we honored remnants' strength rising from ruins. "Glad we didn't let him steal everything," I said. She smiled. "He didn't. We have this." As she left, lilac breeze like mother's garden, I pondered the woman a year past, humiliated, alone, cursed inheritance. I'd buried her reverently. She endured. Now stronger, no need to prove or shout. I'd rebuilt, steady, brick by brick, outlasting whispers on my terms. Peace claimed, not found. Tomorrow, ready as ever. And there you have it, friends. The story of how one woman's world shattered at her husband's funeral, only to rebuild itself piece by piece through unexpected bonds and quiet strength. Looking back on that gray day in Seattle, standing graveside as secrets unraveled like an old quilt, coming apart at the seams, I never imagined the path would lead here. A cozy cottage with a maple tree shading the porch, Bella's tail thumping a steady rhythm, and visits from Sophia that feel like catching up with an old neighbor over coffee from the percolator. We've shared laughs about gardening in this rainy northwest weather, swapped recipes for pot roast like the ones my mother made back in Iowa, and watched the grandkids play fetch in the yard, their giggles filling the air like music from a vintage radio. It's not the life I planned. No grandkids of my own calling me grandma. No golden anniversaries with Robert. But it's real. Earned through the fire of betrayal and the grace of understanding. At our age, we've learned that healing doesn't erase the scars. It weaves them into something stronger. If this tale resonated with you, maybe stirred memories of your own quiet struggles or unspoken pains, thank you for listening. Your time means the world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Renvenge Zinnia. We share these stories to remind us we're not alone in life's twists and turns. Drop a comment below. Where are you tuning in from? Share your own experiences, perhaps a betrayal overcome or a friendship born from hardship. Your voice matters, and who knows, it might just help someone else find their way. Until next time, take care and remember, even in the autumn of life, new springs can bloom.